The aroma of roasting turkey filled the kitchen, a bittersweet comfort on Christmas morning. I'd made Martha's cranberry sauce, the one with the orange zest and just a hint of ginger. She always said it wouldn't be Christmas without it, I murmured to myself, adjusting the flame under the gravy. It felt empty this Christmas, quieter. The house echoed with the ghost of Christmases past, filled with laughter and the boisterous clatter of family. This year the only sound was the gentle crackling of the fire in the hearth. I glanced at the clock on the microwave. Almost noon. They should be here soon. David promised he'd be here by midday. Said he wouldn't miss Christmas dinner with his old man. Even Melissa insisted. He told me, his voice warm over the phone last week. I smiled at the memory, carefully arranging the silverware next to the china. Martha would have wanted everything just so. A sharp rap at the door startled me. "That's them," I exclaimed, my heart lifting. I smoothed down my apron and hurried to the entrance, a wide smile plastered on my face. But instead of David and Melissa, a young man in a courier uniform stood on the doorstep, a small envelope clutched in his hand. "Mr. George Peterson," he asked, his voice flat and impersonal. "Sign here, please." My smile faltered. "Is this from David?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. He just shrugged. "Don't know, sir. Just delivering." I signed for the envelope, my hand trembling slightly, and watched the courier stride back to his van. Closing the door, I leaned against the cool wood, a sudden chill settling over me despite the warmth of the house. Slowly, I tore open the envelope. Inside, a crisp, folded card. Not the cheerful, hand-painted Christmas card I had been expecting, but a plain, store-bought one. My heart sank as I read the neatly printed message. "Dad, so sorry, but we won't be able to make it for Christmas dinner today. Something came up with Melissa's family. Hope you have a good one. Love, David and Melissa." The card slipped from my numb fingers, fluttering to the floor like a fallen leaf. Something came up, a vague, dismissive excuse. After all the preparations, after all the anticipation, they weren't coming. I looked at the table, set for four for me, David, Melissa, and the ever-present ghost of Martha. A wave of loneliness washed over me, so intense it nearly brought me to my knees. I picked up the card again, the words blurring through my tears. "A good one," it mocked. How could I possibly have a good one? This was our first Christmas without Martha, a day meant for family, for togetherness, for remembering, and now I was alone. I stumbled back into the kitchen, the smell of roasting turkey suddenly nauseating. I turned off the oven, the silence of the clicking switch amplifying the emptiness of the house. "Merry Christmas, Martha," I whispered, my voice choked with emotion. "Looks like it's just you and me again." I pulled out a chair and sat down heavily, staring at the untouched meal. The festive decorations, a cruel mockery of my solitude. The carefully arranged silverware, the polished china, the glistening cranberry sauce, all for nothing. Outside, the sky was a bleak gray, mirroring the hollowness in my heart. I watched a lone robin flitting around the bird feeder Martha had hung from the oak tree just outside the kitchen window. A sudden thought struck me. David had refilled the feeder last week when he'd come to help me put up the Christmas lights. He always was thoughtful like that, I mumbled, a faint glimmer of warmth piercing the cold. He knew how much Martha loved watching the birds. I pushed myself away from the table, a strange feeling of unease settling over me. It was more than just disappointment. It was a nagging sense that something wasn't right. David wouldn't do this, not without a good reason. He knew how much this Christmas meant to me. I pulled on my coat and stepped out into the cold air, the wind whipping around me. I walked towards the bird feeder, the robins scattering at my approach. As I reached the feeder, I noticed something tucked beneath the overhang, a small, folded piece of paper, almost the same color as the wood. My heart pounded in my chest as I reached for it. It was a note, handwritten this time, in Melissa's familiar scrawl. "Dad," it began, "please forgive me for this. David doesn't know I'm writing this. There's something I need to tell you, something I can't say over the phone. Meet me at the park tomorrow morning, by the old oak tree. It's about Julian, Melissa's fiance." What could this possibly be about? My mind raced. A sudden spark of anticipation, or perhaps dread mixing with the lingering sadness. Whatever it was, it couldn't be good, but at least it was something, a flicker of hope in the darkness of this lonely Christmas day, a secret, a mystery, a reason, something to hold on to. Rain lashed against the porch windows, mirroring the storm inside me. The courier, face slick with rain, thrust an envelope into my hand and mumbled something about a signature. "Just here, sir," I signed, numbly, already knowing what the crisp white paper held. "Have a good one," the courier offered awkwardly, then hurried back to his van, eager to escape the chill, both literal and metaphorical, that clung to my doorstep. Inside, I tore the envelope open. George, Melissa's neat handwriting began, each looped letter a fresh stab of disappointment. "We decided to spend Christmas at my mom's this year. Hope you understand. Love, Melissa." David hadn't even bothered to sign it. I closed my eyes, the words burning themselves onto the back of my eyelids. Understand? How could I possibly understand? Christmas, our Christmas, the one tradition we'd clung to, the one constant in the shifting sands of grief and change since I lost her. I glanced at the dining room, at the table set for three, the good china, Martha's favorite, gleaming under the soft light of the chandelier. The roast, seasoned and ready to go into the oven, sat on the counter, a monument to my foolish hope. "We'll be there, Dad," David had said just last week, his voice casual, almost dismissive. Wouldn't miss it. Clearly, things had changed. I moved to the window, watching the courier's van disappear down the rain-slicked street. The street lights blurred, haloed by the downpour. The emptiness in the house pressed in on me, heavy and suffocating. I could almost hear Martha's laughter echoing in the silence. "He'll be all right, George," she'd always say whenever David, as a boy, scraped his knee or slammed a door in teenage frustration. "He'll come around." But what if she was wrong? What if this wasn't a scraped knee or a slammed door, but a chasm widening between us, a distance I couldn't bridge? I went into the kitchen and opened the oven, the heat a faint comfort against the icy dread settling in my gut. What was the point? Why bother with the roast, the potatoes, the cranberry sauce Martha used to make from scratch? It wouldn't be Christmas without it. "George," she'd say, her eyes twinkling. Now it felt like Christmas wouldn't be Christmas at all. I pulled out my phone, the cold metal a stark contrast to the warmth radiating from the oven. I could call David. I could demand an explanation. I could what? Beg him to come. The thought withered before it fully formed. Pride, a bitter and welcome companion, settled in my chest. No, I wouldn't beg. Instead, I put the roast back in the fridge, the heavy clunk of the closing door echoing the finality of their absence. I poured myself a glass of scotch, the amber liquid sloshing in the glass as I walked back to the dining room. I sat at the head of the table, the empty chairs on either side mocking my solitude. I raised my glass in a silent toast. "Merry Christmas, Martha," I whispered, my voice catching in my throat. "Merry Christmas." To us the scotch burned a path down my throat, a small, fleeting warmth in the growing chill. The rain continued to beat against the windows, a relentless rhythm against the silence. I stared at the untouched place settings, the gleaming silverware, the folded napkins. Everything was perfect. Everything except the gaping hole where my family should have been. I picked up Melissa's note again, the paper crinkling in my hand. "Hope you understand." The words felt hollow, perfunctory, an afterthought. Suddenly, something about the note struck me. The handwriting, it was Melissa's, undeniably, but there was a tremor in the usually firm strokes, a slight unevenness to the loops and swirls, and the ink it was smudged in one corner, as if a tear had fallen on it, a tear from Melissa. She was always so composed, so practical. I examined the note more closely, holding it up to the light. There, on the back, almost invisible against the white paper, were two tiny, almost imperceptible words. I squinted, holding my breath. "Bird feeder," they read, "the bird feeder. The old wooden one Martha had loved." It hung from a branch of the oak tree in the backyard, swaying gently in the wind and rain. Why would Melissa, a strange feeling, a flicker of something akin to hope, began to warm the cold knot in my stomach. I finished my scotch, the warmth spreading through me, chasing away the chill. I stood up, pushing my chair back with a scrape against the wooden floor. The rain had eased slightly, the drumming on the windows softening to a gentle patter. I went to the back door, my hand hovering over the knob, the bird feeder. What could it possibly mean? I opened the door and stepped out into the damp night air, the scent of rain and wet earth filling my lungs. The oak tree loomed in the darkness, its branches swaying in the wind. And there, hanging from one of the branches, was the bird feeder, silhouetted against the dimly lit sky. I walked towards it, my heart pounding in my chest, a strange premonition growing stronger with every step. Rain lashed against the dining room window, mirroring the storm inside me. The roast sat on the table, untouched, except for the single, forlorn slice I'd managed to cut. "Merry Christmas, George," I muttered to myself, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. I picked up my fork, the silver heavy in my hand. My wife, Mary, had always loved Christmas. The house would be filled with the scent of pine needles and cinnamon, carols playing softly on the radio. She'd spend weeks planning the perfect meal, fussing over every detail. This year I'd tried to recreate her magic. The table was set with her best china, the crystal glasses gleaming under the soft light of the chandelier, but the magic was gone. I forced myself to take a bite of the roast, the flavor bland and lifeless. "It's just food," I told myself. Pushing the plate away, the silence in the house was deafening. Usually this room would be filled with laughter, the clatter of cutlery, and the excited chatter of family. This year it was just me. My son, David, and his wife, Melissa, had decided to spend Christmas with Melissa's family. They'd sent a courier with a note earlier that day, a flimsy piece of paper that felt like a slap in the face. "So sorry. Dad, it had read, something came up. Maybe next year. I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the wooden floor. Next year, I repeated, the words bitter on my tongue. I walked over to the window, staring out at the rain-soaked garden. The bird feeder swung empty. In the wind, a stark reminder of the vibrant birds that usually flocked there, now absent. Like my family, Mary had loved watching those birds. She'd spend hours filling the feeder, chattering away to them as if they were old friends. "They bring so much life to the garden, George," she'd say, her eyes sparkling with delight. I closed my eyes, trying to conjure her image, her warm smile, the gentle touch of her hand. But all I could see was the empty chair across the table, the untouched plate, the silent house. I opened my eyes again, my gaze falling on the untouched Christmas pudding. Mary's recipe, passed down through generations. I'd spent hours preparing it, carefully following her instructions, hoping to capture a sliver of the joy she'd brought to this holiday. "What's the point?" I whispered, my voice cracking. I poured myself a glass of wine, the dark red liquid swirling in the glass like my turbulent emotions. I took a long sip, the alcohol burning a path down my throat. To absent family, I toasted, raising my glass to the empty room. The silence seemed to mock me, amplifying my loneliness. I sat back down at the table, the weight of my solitude pressing down on me. The carefully prepared meal, the festive decorations, the empty chairs, all a testament to a Christmas that wasn't. I picked up the note again, the flimsy paper crinkling in my hand. Something came up. I read aloud, the words devoid of any real meaning. What could possibly be more important than family, than tradition, than spending Christmas together? I knew Melissa had never been particularly fond of my old-fashioned ways, my insistence on tradition, my quiet, predictable life. She'd always been a whirlwind of activity, her life a constant stream of social engagements and career ambitions. I tried to make her feel welcome, to include her in our family rituals, but I'd always sensed a distance, a subtle coolness beneath her polite smiles. I folded the note, tucking it into my pocket. Perhaps it was time to accept that things had changed, that the family I once knew was gone. The thought was a sharp pang of grief, a hollow ache in my chest. I looked around the room, at the remnants of a Christmas that never was. The untouched food, the flickering candles, the silent house. It was a scene of utter desolation, a stark contrast to the vibrant Christmases of the past. I pushed my chair back from the table, the sound echoing in the empty room. "I can't do this," I said to myself, my voice barely a whisper. I needed air, needed to escape the suffocating silence of the house. I grabbed my coat, pulling it on over my shoulders. As I reached the front door, something caught my eye. A flash of color in the rain-soaked garden. I stepped outside, the cold air stinging my face. The bird feeder, still swinging in the wind, now held a small, brightly colored object. It was a Christmas ornament, a delicate glass bird shimmering with iridescent colors. I reached out, my fingers brushing against the smooth, cool surface. It wasn't one of ours. I carefully unhooked it from the feeder, turning it over in my hand. There, etched on the bottom, were two small words. "Don't worry." A wave of confusion washed over me. Don't worry. What did it mean? Who had put it there? My gaze swept across the garden, searching for an answer. The rain continued to fall, washing away the remnants of the day, leaving me standing alone in the gathering darkness, clutching the small glass bird in my hand. A flicker of hope, a sliver of warmth, In the midst of the cold, empty Christmas, rain lashed against the window, mirroring the storm inside me. Christmas Day, a day for family, and I was utterly alone. The courier-delivered note, crisp and impersonal, still lay on the table. "So sorry, Dad, but we won't be able to make it for Christmas this year. Mom's expecting us, my son, David, and his wife, Melissa. They chose her family again." I sigh, pushing away the untouched plate of Christmas dinner. The turkey, once golden and promising, now sat congealed and cold, a stark symbol of my solitude. I'd cooked all of Mary's favorites. It felt wrong to eat without her. Every Christmas since she passed, I'd kept up the traditions, hoping to hold on to a piece of her, a piece of us. But it was getting harder each year. David's visits were becoming less frequent, the phone calls shorter. "David," I'd asked when he'd call last week, hesitant, "any chance you and Melissa can come home for Christmas?" There'd been a pause, a rustle of paper on the other end. Then, "We'll see, Dad. Melissa's mom really wants us there." I stood, the chair scraping against the wooden floor, the sound echoing in the empty house. The silence pressed in, heavy and suffocating. I wandered to the living room, the decorated Christmas tree twinkling mockingly in the corner. Mary and I had always decorated it together, each ornament a cherished memory. Now it just felt like another reminder of what I'd lost. "It's just not the same without you, Mary," I whispered, my voice catching in my throat. I sank onto the sofa, the plush cushions offering no comfort. The house was too big, too quiet. Even the crackling fire in the hearth seemed to mock my loneliness. Picking up my phone, I scrolled through Facebook, a habit I'd grown to despise yet couldn't seem to break. There it was, a photo of David and Melissa, beaming, surrounded by Melissa's family, a long, laden table overflowing with food, laughter, and warmth, a house full of life. Melissa's caption mocked me. "So grateful for a house full of family this Christmas," my heart clenched. They looked so happy, happy without me. I closed my eyes, the image seared into my mind. This wasn't how Christmas was supposed to be. This wasn't how family was supposed to be. "I don't understand," I murmured, the words barely audible. What did I do wrong? I felt a surge of anger, hot and bitter. I'd always tried to be a good father, a good husband. I'd worked hard to provide for them, to give them a good life. And this was how they repaid me, by abandoning me on Christmas Day. The anger quickly faded, replaced by a dull ache of sadness. I put the phone down, unable to bear the sight of their joy, a joy I wasn't a part of. I stood and walked to the window, watching the rain continue to fall. Street lights shimmer on the wet pavement, casting an eerie glow on the deserted street. Everyone else was inside, warm and safe, surrounded by loved ones. Everyone but me. It's just not fair," I whispered to the empty room. The weight of my loneliness was crushing. I missed Mary's laughter, her warm embrace. I missed David's childhood enthusiasm, the way his eyes would light up on Christmas morning. I even missed Melissa's nervous chatter, her attempts to bridge the gap between us. Now there was just this emptiness, a void that seemed to grow larger with each passing year. I turned away from the window, the bleakness of the night reflecting my own desolate mood. The remnants of the Christmas dinner sat on the dining table, a stark reminder of my isolation. "Maybe next year will be different," I said to myself, though the words felt hollow even as I spoke them. Maybe next year they'd remember me. Maybe next year I wouldn't be spending Christmas alone. But deep down, a cold, hard knot of doubt settled in my stomach. I knew with a chilling certainty that things were changing, shifting in a way I couldn't control, and I feared that this empty Christmas was just a taste of things to come. The thought lingered, heavy and oppressive, as I switched off the Christmas tree lights, plunging the room into darkness, a darkness that mirrored the hollowness within me. The silence returned, even more profound now, broken only by the relentless drumming of the rain against the window pane. I climbed the stairs, each step heavy with weariness and resignation, the echo of their laughter, their happiness, a phantom sound in the stillness of my empty house. The silence in the living room was heavy, broken only by the crackling of the dying fire in the hearth. Christmas Day was drawing to a close, and the festive decorations, once symbols of joy and anticipation, now felt like mocking reminders of my solitude. I picked up the courier-delivered note again, the crisp paper cold against my fingertips. David and I won't be able to make it for Christmas this year, Dad. Melissa's neat script read. We're spending it with my family. Hope you understand. I let out a sigh, a puff of air that seemed to carry the weight of all the Christmases past. I remembered the vibrant Christmases we used to have when my wife, Eleanor, was still alive. The house would be filled with laughter, the scent of her cinnamon rolls wafting from the kitchen. David, just a boy then, would be bouncing with excitement, barely able to contain himself until it was time to open presents. Eleanor always made sure Christmas was special, a day filled with warmth and tradition. After she passed, the holidays had never been quite the same. David and I tried to keep the spirit alive, but a certain hollowness had crept in, a void that no amount of tinsel and carols could fill. This year the emptiness felt particularly acute. David's marriage to Melissa had brought a new dynamic into our family. She was a kind woman, but there was a reserve about her, a subtle distance that I couldn't quite bridge. She was close to her own family, and I understood her desire to spend the holidays with them. Still, it stung that she and David couldn't make time for me, even for a few hours. We'll see you soon, the note concluded, the words feeling hollow in the face of their absence. I rose from the sofa, the joints in my knees creaking in protest. The remnants of the Christmas dinner I had prepared sat untouched on the dining table. Roast turkey, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, all the traditional dishes Eleanor had taught me to make. I'd hoped to share them with David and Melissa, to recapture a sliver of the Christmases we once shared. Now, the sight of the food only deepened my sense of isolation. I wandered into the kitchen, the silence amplifying the emptiness of the house. I began clearing the table, mechanically wrapping the leftovers in foil. As I reached for the gravy boat, my gaze fell on the window overlooking the backyard. The bird feeder, usually bustling with activity, was empty. Strange. Eleanor always made sure it was filled, especially during the winter months. A flicker of movement caught my eye. A small folded piece of paper lay nestled amongst the birdseed at the bottom of the feeder. Confused, I stepped outside, the cold air biting at my face. I reached into the feeder and retrieved the note, my fingers numb with cold. It was another note, smaller than the first, folded tightly. As I unfolded it, a wave of warmth spread through me, chasing away the chill of the evening. Meet me at the old oak tree by the creek tomorrow morning, the note read, in Melissa's familiar handwriting. There's something I need to show you. a surge of confusion, mixed with a flicker of hope, coursed through me. Why would Melissa leave a secret note in the bird feeder? What could she possibly want to show me? And why the secrecy? I returned inside, the small note clutched in my hand. The living room, still silent, no longer felt as empty. The dying embers in the fireplace seemed to glow a little brighter, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. The untouched Christmas dinner still sat on the table, a stark reminder of my solitude. Yet the weight in my chest had lifted, replaced by a growing sense of anticipation. The note in my hand was a small thing, a whisper of a promise in the silence of Christmas night. It held the potential for something more, a glimmer of understanding in the midst of my disappointment. I looked at the note again, the words a beacon in the darkness. Tomorrow morning, at the old oak tree. What could Melissa possibly have to tell me? The bedside lamp cast long shadows across the room. Christmas Day was ending, and the silence in the house felt heavier than ever. I sat on the edge of the bed, the crumpled courier-delivered note still clutched in my hand. Spending Christmas with Melissa's family, it read. So sorry, Dad. David's hurried scrawl beneath Melissa's neater script felt like a final blow. I sighed. They chose her family, I muttered to the empty room. Again, it wasn't the first holiday they'd skipped, not even the first Christmas. But this one stung. This was the first Christmas without Mary. I stood up, the joints in my knees clicking in the quiet. She would have known what to say, I whispered, running a hand over the smooth, cool surface of her side of the bed, the indentation of her head on the pillow still faintly visible. Mary always knew how to smooth things over, how to make everyone feel loved and included. She'd have found a way, I said, a lump forming in my throat. She always did. I walked over to the window, the twinkling Christmas lights of the neighbors mocking me with their cheerful glow. It's just different now, I admitted, my voice cracking. Everything's different. The thought of facing another holiday, another birthday, another anniversary without her was almost unbearable. And now, with David and Melissa drifting further away, the loneliness felt like a physical weight pressing down on me. I glanced out at the backyard, at the bird feeder Mary had insisted on hanging just outside the kitchen window. She loved watching those little birds. I remembered a small smile touching my lips. A flicker of movement caught my eye, a small, folded piece of paper tucked into the side of the feeder. Odd, I hadn't noticed it earlier. Curiosity piqued. I pulled on my coat and stepped out into the crisp night air. What is this? I murmured, approaching the feeder. The paper was damp from the melting snow, the ink slightly blurred. Carefully, I unfolded it. It was a note, written in Melissa's familiar handwriting. Meet me at the park tomorrow, it read. 10 a.m. by the old oak tree. Please. Dad, my heart pounded in my chest. The park, I whispered, rereading the note. Why the secrecy? Why not just call? A wave of apprehension washed over me. Was something wrong? Was Melissa okay? Had something happened to David? 1,000 possibilities raced through my mind. What's going on? I muttered, clutching the note tightly in my hand. I returned to the warmth of the house, the small piece of paper feeling like a lead weight in my pocket. I paced the living room, the unanswered questions swirling in my mind. The old oak tree, I repeated, trying to decipher the meaning behind her words. It was their special place, the spot where David had proposed to Melissa, a place filled with happy memories. But why choose that spot for a clandestine meeting? I stopped pacing and looked at the framed photograph on the mantelpiece. Mary, David, and Melissa beaming at the camera, their arms wrapped around each other. Taken just last Christmas, a pang of sadness shot through me. We were so happy then, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. What happened? I stared at the photograph, searching for answers in their smiling faces, but the faces only reflected the past, a past that seemed so distant now. The note in my pocket felt like a lifeline, a fragile thread of hope in the darkness. Tomorrow, I said, a new resolve hardening my voice. Tomorrow, I'll find out what's going on. I glanced at the clock. It was late. I needed to rest. I needed to be prepared for whatever tomorrow held, but sleep evaded me. I lay in bed, the image of the note, the park, the old oak tree playing on repeat in my mind. Melissa, I whispered into the darkness, what are you planning? The anticipation was almost unbearable. I tossed and turned, my mind racing with possibilities. Was this a chance for reconciliation? Was Melissa reaching out, trying to bridge the growing chasm between us? Or was this something else entirely, something I couldn't even begin to imagine? The questions gnawed at me, keeping me awake until the first rays of dawn crept through the curtains. As the sun rose, casting a pale light across the room, I knew one thing for sure. I needed answers, and I would get them, come what may. I got out of bed, a strange mix of apprehension and determination filling me. I dressed quickly, the crumpled note still clutched in my hand. This small piece of paper, this cryptic message, held the key to understanding what was happening with my family. And I was ready to unlock the secret. I had to be, for Mary, for David, and for myself. I had to know. The house felt colder than usual that Christmas night. I couldn't sleep. Melissa and Julian's note, delivered so impersonally by courier, kept flashing in my mind. We've decided to spend Christmas with my family this year, it read. Simple, polite, yet a knife twist in my gut. I tossed and turned, the silence of the house amplifying my loneliness. Every creak of the floorboards, every tick of the grandfather clock in the hall seemed to mock me. It's just you, old man, they seemed to whisper. I closed my eyes, picturing Martha, my late wife. They don't mean it, George, she'd say, her voice soft and reassuring as it always was. They're young. They'll understand someday. But would they? This was the third Christmas without her, and each year the chasm between us seemed to grow wider. I got out of bed, pulled on my robe, and shuffled downstairs. The remnants of my carefully prepared Christmas dinner sat on the dining table, a stark reminder of my solitude. We always had such lovely Christmases. Martha, I murmured to the empty room. I remembered the laughter, the warmth, the joy that used to fill this house. Now it was just a hollow shell. I wandered into the living room, the glow of the Christmas tree casting long, mournful shadows across the room. We always bought a real tree, Martha. Remember, I touched a branch, the pine needle sharp against my skin. A wave of grief washed over me, so intense it made me gasp. I sank into my armchair, burying my face in my hands. After a while, a strange impulse seized me. I felt drawn to the window, to the backyard bathed in the pale moonlight. What am I doing? I muttered to myself, but something compelled me forward. I opened the back door and stepped outside, the cold night air stinging my cheeks. I walked towards the bird feeder, a simple wooden structure Martha and I had together years ago. We used to spend hours watching the birds flitting around it, their cheerful chirping filling the air. The birds always loved your seed mix, Martha, I whispered, a faint smile touching my lips. As I reached the feeder, something caught my eye. A small, folded piece of paper was tucked beneath the roof. Confused, I reached for it. It wasn't a stray leaf or a piece of trash blown in by the wind. It was a note. My heart began to pound in my chest. Who would leave a note here? I whispered. I unfolded the paper, my hands trembling. It was written in Melissa's handwriting. Dad, it began, I'm so sorry. This wasn't my choice. Julian's mother has been ill, and he insisted we spend Christmas with his family. I tried to tell him how much it would hurt you, but he wouldn't listen. Please know that I love you and I miss you. I'll call you tomorrow. A wave of relief washed over me, so potent it almost buckled my knees. Oh, Melissa, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. It wasn't a grand gesture, not a dramatic reconciliation, but in that simple note, tucked away in the bird feeder, I found a glimmer of hope. A connection, a secret understanding between us. It was enough, for now I looked up at the sky, the stars twinkling like diamonds scattered across a velvet cloth. Thank you, Martha, I whispered. You always knew how to find the light in the darkness. The chill of the night no longer seemed so biting. There was still a coldness in the house, a void where laughter and warmth used to reside. But now a tiny spark of warmth flickered within me, a spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, Christmas wouldn't always be this way. Maybe, one day, we could find our way back to each other. Christmas morning dawned cold and crisp, the sun a pale disk in the frosty sky. I stood by the kitchen window, sipping lukewarm coffee, watching a robin peck at the bird feeder I'd filled the day before. It was a small, simple thing, but it had always brought Martha such joy. They're such cheerful little creatures, George, she'd say, her eyes twinkling. It's like having a little bit of spring, even in the dead of winter. This year, winter felt particularly dead. Melissa and David's courier note still lay on the table, a stark white rectangle against the dark wood. Unable to make it this Christmas, Dad, it read, spending it with Melissa's family. Hope you have a good one. They hadn't even called. The robin fluttered away, leaving a trail of scattered seeds on the frosty grass. A glint of something metallic caught my eye, nestled amongst the sunflower hearts. Curiosity piqued, I pulled on my coat and stepped out into the biting air. The note from Melissa and David had stung, but this small, unexpected mystery offered a momentary distraction. As I reached the feeder, I saw it clearly, a small silver key, the kind you might find on an old-fashioned locket. Attached to it was a tiny, rolled-up piece of paper secured with a thin red ribbon. My heart quickened. This wasn't just any lost trinket. Carefully, I unfurled the paper. My fingers, numb with cold, fumbled with the ribbon. Inside, in Melissa's familiar handwriting, were just a few words. Meet me by the old oak at noon. The old oak. That was our place, Martha's and mine. We'd carved our initials into its bark when we were just kids, young and foolishly in love. It overlooked a meadow where we'd picnicked on lazy summer afternoons, where David had taken his first wobbly steps. Why would Melissa want to meet me there? What could this mean? A wave of confusion washed over me. Was this some kind of apology? An explanation? or something else entirely. The initial sting of their absence hadn't faded, but a flicker of hope, fragile as a newborn flame, began to warm me from the inside. I glanced back at the house, cold and empty. The Christmas dinner I'd painstakingly prepared sat untouched on the dining table, a silent testament to my solitude. But the key, the note, the meeting place, they all hinted at something more, something I couldn't quite grasp, but something that compelled me forward. The hours until noon stretched out before me, an eternity of anticipation. I paced the house, restless and uncertain. I made fresh coffee, trying to quell the nervous tremor in my hands. The silence of the house pressed in on me, amplifying the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Each chime felt like a hammer blow, marking the slow, agonizing passage of time. Finally, the clock struck 12. Without a second thought, I grabbed my coat and headed out into the crisp winter air. The walk to the old oak was familiar, every twist and turn of the path etched into my memory. As I approached, I saw Melissa standing beneath its sprawling branches, a splash of vibrant color against the muted winter landscape. She was wrapped in a thick wool coat, her breath clouding the air in front of her. "Dad," she said, her voice soft, almost hesitant. "I'm so glad you came." "Melissa," I reply, my voice thick with unspoken questions. "What is all this about the key?" The note. She took a step closer, her eyes filled with a complex mixture of emotions I couldn't quite decipher. "I know you're hurt," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I understand why." Then why, I asked, the question raw and ragged. "Why wouldn't you just tell me why you couldn't be here for Christmas?" Melissa reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. It was the same deep burgundy as the one Martha used to keep her grandmother's locket in. My heart pounded in my chest. This was it. This was the explanation. She opened the box, revealing a gleaming silver locket, identical to Martha's except for the inscription on the back. "This was Mom's," Melissa said, her voice trembling slightly. "She wanted you to have it." I stared at the locket, speechless. Memories flooded back, vivid and bittersweet. Martha wearing the locket at our wedding. The weight caught the light as she laughed, the cool weight of it against my skin. When I held her close, "She left it for you," Melissa continued, "with instructions to give it to you on Christmas Day at the old oak. She knew this Christmas would be hard for you." Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring my vision. "But why?" I choked out. "Why didn't she tell me?" Melissa took my hand, her touch warm and reassuring. "She wanted you to have one last Christmas memory with her," she explained softly. "A memory just for you, at your special place." She paused, then added, her voice barely a whisper, "And she wanted me to tell you something else, something important." My heart ached with a mixture of grief and anticipation. What could it be? What final message had Martha left for me? Melissa leaned in, her voice hushed and confidential. She said to tell you that she hid the deed to the beach house and the bird feeder. Merry Christmas, Dad. Christmas morning dawned, crisp and cold. The silence in the house pressed in on me, heavy and unwelcome. I made my way to the kitchen, the remnants of yesterday's elaborate, uneaten Christmas dinner, a stark reminder of my solitude. "Another Christmas alone," I murmured to myself, the words catching in my throat. I poured a cup of coffee, the steam curling upwards, a fragile wisp against the stark reality of the day. The silence was broken only by the clinking of the spoon against the porcelain. I stared out the window, watching the birds flitting around the bird feeder David and his wife, Melissa, had given me last year. It was a thoughtful gift, a symbol of connection, now tinged with a bitter irony. They should have been here, I whispered, the ache in my chest tightening. David, my only son, and Melissa had chosen to spend Christmas with her family. The courier-delivered note, crisp and impersonal, still sat on the kitchen counter, a paper cut to my heart. "We'll see you soon," Dad, it read, the closing sentiment feeling hollow and distant. I sighed, a deep, shuddering breath that did little to ease the weight in my chest. I finished my coffee, the bitter taste mirroring my mood. I couldn't bring myself to clear away the remnants of the feast. Each untouched dish, each empty chair, was a silent testament to my isolation. I decided to step outside, to breathe in the fresh air, to try and find some semblance of peace in the quiet beauty of the winter morning. The frost crunched under my feet as I walked towards the bird feeder. The birds scattered as I approached, their wings beating a frantic rhythm against the stillness. I reached out to refill the feeder, my fingers brushing against something unexpected. A small, folded piece of paper, tucked carefully beneath the rim. My heart skipped a beat. This wasn't yesterday's note. This was something new. With trembling hands, I unfolded the paper. It was a note written in Melissa's familiar handwriting. "Dad," it began, and my heart clenched with a mixture of anticipation and dread. "I'm so sorry. I know this isn't how you wanted to spend Christmas." I tried to convince David, but his mother, the sentence trailed off, leaving the unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. I understood the complicated dynamics of blended families, the unspoken tensions, the invisible tug-of-war for time and affection. I had seen it before, experienced it myself with my late wife, Eleanor. Christmas had always been a delicate balancing act, a tightrope walk between two families, two sets of traditions. Eleanor would have known what to do, I thought, a wave of sadness washing over me. She had been the glue that held our family together, the gentle hand that smoothed over the rough edges. She would have found a way to bridge the divide, to make everyone feel loved and included. I closed my eyes, picturing her warm smile, her gentle touch. "I miss you," I whispered, the words carried away on the crisp winter wind. I continued reading Melissa's note. "David feels torn," she wrote. "He loves you very much, but he also feels obligated to his mother. Please try to understand." Understanding. That was the key, wasn't it? Understanding the complexities, the unspoken pressures, the silent battles waged within families. Understanding that sometimes love wasn't enough to overcome the weight of history and obligation. The note continued, and my eyes widened as I read the final lines. "We'll be there for New Year's, Dad, just the three of us. I promise." A warmth spread through me, chasing away the lingering chill of disappointment. A quiet smile touched my lips. New Year's, a fresh start, a new beginning, a chance to rebuild, to reconnect, to forge a new path forward. I looked up at the clear, bright sky, a sense of peace settling over me. The silence of the morning no longer felt heavy and oppressive. It felt calm, expectant, filled with the promise of things to come. I refilled the bird feeder, scattering seeds for the waiting birds. They fluttered down, their bright feathers a flash of color against the winter landscape. I watched them for a moment, their simple act of feeding a small, quiet affirmation of life's enduring cycle. I walked back towards the house, the crumpled note clutched in my hand. I would save the Christmas dinner. We would eat it together, David, Melissa, and I, on New Year's Day. It wouldn't be Christmas, but it would be something more. It would be a testament to the enduring bonds of family, a symbol of forgiveness and understanding, and perhaps, in its own quiet way, it would be a kind of revenge. Not the kind fueled by anger or resentment, but the kind that blossoms from love and hope, the kind that whispers, "We'll be okay."